Imagine walking into your neighborhood grocery store and seeing prices climb week after week. At the gas pump, numbers tick upward faster than your paycheck can keep up. Meanwhile, you scroll through headlines about sanctions, international disputes, and tough measures against Russia. For many Americans, these foreign policy actions feel distant, but in reality, they ripple directly into everyday lives, from family budgets to job opportunities. This script explores how measures aimed at Russia have triggered waves of inflation and employment challenges inside the United States, reshaping the economy and testing the resilience of ordinary citizens. Sanctions and tough measures are often seen as clean, non-violent tools of statecraft. Rather than sending troops into battle, Washington can restrict trade, freeze assets, and cut off financial access to pressure foreign governments into compliance. When the United States and its allies imposed sweeping sanctions on Russia, the goals were clear: weaken its economy, limit its capacity to wage war, and send a message of unity to the world. But while the target lay thousands of miles away, the repercussions quickly found their way into American households. One of the most immediate consequences of sanctioning a major energy exporter like Russia was the disruption of global oil and gas supplies. Energy markets are tightly interconnected. When a key player is cut off, prices rise everywhere. For Americans, this translated into higher fuel costs at the pump, soaring heating bills during winter, and a spike in transportation costs that rippled into every corner of the supply chain. Food deliveries, factory production, and even airfare all became more expensive. Inflation, already a simmering issue in the post-pandemic economy, suddenly boiled over. For families living paycheck to paycheck, these rising costs were not just statistics. They were tough choices, whether to fill up the car or cut back on groceries, whether to pay the electricity bill or delay a medical expense. Inflation eroded savings, stretched household budgets thin, and created a sense of financial anxiety across the nation. It also hit military families and working-class communities especially hard, as many relied on fixed salaries or modest allowances that failed to keep up with rapid price increases. The employment landscape was also reshaped in unexpected ways. Sanctions disrupted trade flows and severed business ties that American companies once relied on. Industries with exposure to Russian markets, from agriculture and aviation to technology and manufacturing, found themselves locked out of contracts and supply lines. Some firms laid off workers or froze hiring. Others struggled to pivot toward new partners, creating uncertainty in towns and regions closely tied to those industries. Defense contractors and energy companies experienced mixed results. While some sectors saw increased demand due to shifting government spending priorities, others faced delays, shortages, or inflated costs of raw materials. In short, the employment crisis did not strike evenly across the economy. Instead, it created winners and losers, intensifying inequality between communities that could adapt and those left behind. For the average American worker, the effects were deeply personal. Rising prices meant that even if wages increased slightly, the gains were swallowed by inflation. Job insecurity added another layer of stress, with people fearing layoffs or reduced hours. Small businesses faced higher costs for inventory, utilities, and transportation, forcing many to downsize or close altogether. What began as a foreign policy strategy to weaken an adversary became a domestic challenge for workers trying to maintain stability. Public perception of these measures grew divided. Supporters argued that tough sanctions were necessary to defend global order, deter aggression, and uphold democratic values. Critics pointed to the strain on American households, asking whether the costs at home outweighed the intended benefits abroad. This debate spilled into political discourse, shaping elections, legislative priorities, and public trust in government institutions. When Americans see direct impacts on their wallets, foreign policy ceases to feel like an abstract concept and becomes a pressing local issue. At the same time, long-term structural consequences began to emerge. Countries under heavy sanctions often adapt by forging new alliances, developing parallel financial systems, or investing in domestic production. For the United States, this means that the leverage of sanctions could diminish over time, forcing policymakers to reconsider how sustainable these measures really are. Meanwhile, American workers and consumers continue to feel the short-term pain, raising questions about whether alternative strategies could achieve similar goals without such heavy domestic costs. Still, these challenges also highlighted opportunities for resilience. Some sectors of the U.S. economy responded with innovation. Renewable energy projects gained momentum as high fuel prices renewed interest in alternatives to oil and gas. Local manufacturing received a boost as supply chains were reevaluated and reshored. Job training programs expanded in regions hit by layoffs, aiming to help workers transition into new industries. These silver linings did not erase the hardships, but they revealed pathways for adaptation and long-term growth. For policymakers, the key lesson is that foreign policy cannot be separated from domestic well-being. Tough measures abroad inevitably ripple into the lives of citizens at home. Supporting workers, stabilizing prices, and providing clear communication about why sacrifices are necessary are critical steps in maintaining public trust. If Americans understand how their struggles connect to broader national security goals, they are more likely to endure short-term hardships for long-term stability. Tough measures against Russia were designed to send a message abroad, but they also delivered a message at home. Foreign policy is never truly foreign. Inflation at the gas pump, rising grocery bills, and employment uncertainty became daily reminders that global actions have local consequences. The United States faced not only the challenge of holding adversaries accountable, but also the responsibility of protecting its own people from economic fallout. As the nation reflects on these experiences, one truth stands out. The strength of America's foreign policy depends not just on alliances and sanctions, but also on the resilience and well-being of its citizens. A strategy that defends values abroad must also sustain livelihoods at home. Only then can the country truly balance its role as a global leader with its duty to the people it serves.